welcome back everyone to another glorious Victoria 2 thing. Dev Diaries. Now, I know everyone's probably waiting for my epic takes on the slavery that just got released, the slavery Dev Diary or whatever. But the thing is, I still haven't done the ones from 6 to 14, so yeah. I'm gonna do 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and then do 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And so we're gonna get the slavery. As you can see, there's already some slavery over here. I don't know why I'm half Southern American and half Scottish, but whatever. Hello, once again, welcome to another Victoria Free Dev Diary. Well, previous Dev Diaries have been focusing on the economy. We're now going to focus to another core pillar of the Victoria series, internal politics. More specifically, we're talking about interest groups, which form the nucleus of Victoria Free's political gameplay. So basically, the interest group is what is replacing the political parties that were previously around. So it's a collection of pops that espouse certain political views and want to change the country and be more in line with those views. Interest groups are drawn from another number of different templates, but will vary in their exact views from country to country, which is, if you'll recall, something that in my first snapshot thoughts of Victoria Free, I was wondering whether that would be the case, but obviously it is, based on factors such as the local religion, which social movements that appeared in the country, and on the personal views of their leader. Landowners is an interest group dominated by the aristocracy and tends to be firmly conservative side of politics. So this is the screen where you can see the, I guess, identity card of an interest group. So you can see it's the landowners, you can see their symbol, you can see their ideology. Looks like they like, do they like slavery? I'm not sure. It would make sense that they would like slavery. They like, I guess, nepotism, question mark, something like that. They like elitism, and they like misogyny. Wait, okay. Okay, they like misogyny. So you can either suppress, promote, join, or remove. Join? Okay. Remove, question mark? Is it like join? I don't know. So yeah, obviously this is like government actions with the interest group. You can see the interest group clout, you can see the interest group approval of what you're doing, and you can see the traits where if your policies are confirming to the sort of ideology and the demands of the interest group, then you're going to get bonuses because the interest group is going to be supporting your government. Same thing, of course, there's a leader. He likes slavery, and he likes other shit. Anyway, aristocrats are in there. Clergymen are in there. And you can see the status of those. So that's that. Basically, interest groups are fundamentally made up of pops. All individual and all pops are either members of an interest group or politically inactive, with the ratio based on factors such as profession, wealth, literacy, etc. Which I hope is going to like make sense, because if you think about it, like at the beginning of the game, especially in very aristocratic feudal societies, the ratios of lower class political participation should be extremely low, like 0.1% level of low. And then as movements that are more democratic and especially more socialist, more sort of working class interest minded come into factor, / more populism, later with fascism and all that, then the political participation of lower class pops should increase. And even then, it really shouldn't go up all that much, because in reality, the political participation rates are incredibly low. And even if you just take voting in let me actually see US elections turnout, even just by voting, I wonder if this is going to give me it's not telling me how much turnout there actually, well, oh no, there is. That's a lot for the U.S. But for example, for the first elections in like the French Republic after the French Revolution, even when universal male suffrage was a thing in the French Republic, the rate of turnout was between 10 and 25%, something like that. Looks like with the United States, it was more along the lines of 50%, but it went up to like somewhere around the 90% marker. But of course, today it's back down to 50%. So even when it comes to just the most basic participation, which is turnout, um, the amount of the overall population that participates in the political process is actually very, very limited. And it would make sense if this was represented, but I don't know. As mentioned, blah, 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 yes. Again, dependent on multiple factors, the main ones being the material wealth and their status. So obviously, more wealth equals more political strength added to the interest group. And and the status that is offered to each individual, like class type, to the nations under the nation's power structure. Because of course, sorry, I had to blow my nose. Because of course, in a democratic republic, you're gonna have that more types of pops are going to have more representation. For example, some single wealthy aristocrat in the oligarchy would provide hundreds or even thousands of times the political strength of a poor laborer, which, perhaps should be even higher in some cases. The total political strength of all pops in all interest groups is what gives it the level of clout, the amount of political weight it can assert on the country and the government. It is important to note that POPs are not unified in which interest group they support. Individuals within POPs, so you have a single POP of farmers or whatever, are the ones that decide their interest group, and a single POP can have potentially individuals supporting every single interest group in a game in different numbers. So this is kind of like in Victoria too, you have POPs that can, in a single POP, have like 30% votes conservatives, 20% votes liberals, 10% votes reactionaries, whatever. So it's basically just a porting of that system. Some pops have no political strength at all, usually due to being disenfranchised. So obviously, if you're a gamer country that discriminates against women or a particular religion of culture, just like probably every country at the beginning is going to have some type of gaming involved. So these pops are outside the system, unable to demand reform through the regular political system of interest groups, and instead having to rely on other methods to put pressure on the government, but we won't focus on those today. And I hope that, like, for example, the militancy of a pop is going to rise faster if it is disenfranchised, because shoots himself, dies of cringe. It just makes sense. Anyway, so you can see here you've got a pop, I suppose. This looks like a pop. Oh, no, it's an interest group. It says the state. It says the culture. Oh no, okay, this is like a state little state window. So the state is Svealand, the culture is Swedish, the religion is Protestant, and the primary interest group, and you can see down here, is industrialists. So I'm guessing this is basically based on the political strength of all the different interest groups within a region, which hopefully is going to result in some like an organic preeminence of interest groups that make sense in every province. For example, if a state has a lot of industry, then it's more likely that the industrialists are going to be the primary interest group instead of the landowners, because there are going to be more capitalist pops. And thus, the capitalist pops are going to send more political power to the industrialist interest group than the aristocrats manage with the landowning group, which hopefully is going to make like the American Civil War or whatever make sense in terms of how it plays out, because slavery loving pops down south are going to have their states, which are primarily agricultural, be ruled by the landowners or whatever, right? And so Anyway, as mentioned above, interest groups have a number of ideologies that determine their views on which laws the country should enact or not. Different interest groups will have different ideologies. So, of course, the landowners are going to be more conservative than the trade unions. Wow, incredible. These are not entirely set in stone. They can be changed over the course of the game. That's actually really interesting. The idea that an interest group can kind of reform, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because the farthest of the right wing in 1836 probably is not going to be the same as the farthest of the right wing in 1920. It's probably going to have different views, you know? So the reactionary interest groups or whatever are going to be sort of shifting around. Again, it would make a lot more sense if just political parties were a thing, but I don't know, Paradox shoots himself. They appear to want to use this gimmick. So I'm still not very sold on the interest groups, but whatever. I would like there to be both interest groups and parties, but hey, that's just me. It will also vary based on the current leader of the interest groups, who comes with his or her own personal ideology and view of the world, which is also that's actually a change that I really like, because Victoria 2 was really depersonalized as a strategy game. Well, yeah, sometimes people matter, even individuals in history, so it does make sense that the political faction can shift based on the single leader. Additionally, some interest groups in certain countries who have some unique ideologies based on their religion and culture, such as the Confucian scholars in Qing, who have more Confucianism. Okay, that makes sense. So you can see here with the Anglican Church, you can see that some of these ideological stances. So I'm not quite sure exactly where the right click to open the context menu. Damn, UI work. I'm not quite sure exactly where the cursor is supposed to be on, whether or not on the right or in the center. I think on the right. So it's probably this one. So the stance on church and state. I see. There's also like an even like gradation, I suppose. They strongly disapprove of, you being extremist in the other sense, while they strongly approve of the thing, while they're neutral towards the middle route. Okay, I see. And I suppose this means whether or not you're going to get a relationship bonus or a relationship malice and potentially bad modifiers. So these interest groups have a level of clout based on the political strength of their constituent pops. Clout is calculated by comparing their political strength to that of the other interest groups of the country. If all the interest groups together in Belgium have put together 100k political strength and the landowners have 30k, then they have 30% clout in Belgium, which makes sense. So this will determine their classification as powerful, influential, or marginalized. Interest groups also have a level of approval, which is based on factors such as how much they approve of the country's laws, whether they are in government or in opposition, and how many of their individual members are loyalists or radicals, and we will see those on a later Dev Diary. Okay, that makes sense, because like, if you have more radicals, then boom, boom. There are numerous other factors that can affect approval as well, such as how you react to certain events or decisions that you take. Of course. This makes all the sense. So, together, the classification and approval of an interest group determines which traits are active for an interest group at any given time and how impactful they are. So that's obviously like, I suppose, the more approval and the more power they have, the stronger even. So I guess approval is going to be unlocking the traits, while the classification, so the level of power, is going to make them more powerful or not. There are different traits, positive and negative, with positive traits being activated when an interest group is happy and negative when they are not so happy, of course. If an interest group is powerful, then the effects are stronger. Yes, that's exactly what we reached as a conclusion. So traits are not, of course, the only way that interest groups can affect countries, and it's even possible for one or several angry interest groups to start a civil war, potentially bringing in foreign countries to support them, which is actually really interesting, because, yeah, in my the rebel system of Victoria 2 is definitely one of the biggest downsides of the game and the sort of weaknesses. So having this is going to make it, I think, somewhat more likely that civil wars are going to make sense once the sort of inevitable horrible bugs at release are going to be fixed and all that. So you can see here there's some aristocrat type um, landowning interest group, and they have the noblesse oblige trait, which activate. Oh, it's the Junkers. It's the fucking. It's the German motherfuckers. So if the approval is at least loyal plus 10 and they're not marginalized, then you're going to activate the trait, which is going to give plus 20% aristocrat investment pool contribution. So basically, the aristocrats are going to invest more into agriculture, I suppose. Okay, that's interesting. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, yeah, political parties and whether they will be a part of Victoria Free. So I want to briefly touch on this. What I can tell you for now is that we're looking into a solution where parties can form in certain countries as constellation of interest groups holding a shared political platform. This is fucking dumb, to be honest, because in certain countries, parties by the 1920s should have formed in every country. Of course, there should be conditions for the formation of like modern political parties, I guess, or modern-ish. Like if we're like really, really, really hard looking into it, like the Americans had political parties for the entirety of the existence of the of the United States, but even today, the American political parties are very much not the same thing as like modern political parties in Europe or Asia. Um, but yeah, if you take that as a baseline, something that's like about as organized as like the British political parties of the 19th century, then most countries should have political parties by the end of the 19th century. And then the ones that are like really, really primitive and blah, blah, blah are going to have them by the 1920s when, communism comes along and, the first socialist party, the first parties are going to be the socialist parties or whatever. I don't know. I just want to shoot myself when I read that because I don't know. This is something that is by no means fully nailed down at this point, though. So don't take this as a 100% firm commitment as to how they would function. So yeah, whatever. That's your problem. That's not something that I particularly enjoy, but oh well. Anyway, now we have laws. Damn. Oh no, don't particularly want to do that. Damn. Bit of a Commune of Paris moment right here. Yeah, interesting. So, after a blah blah blah, yeah, whatever. You're trolling. So legal reform in your country creates different political, economic, and social conditions for your pops, which over time changes the fabric of your society. This change can be slow or and incremental, or fast and revolutionary, sometimes literally. So there are three major categories of laws with 7 subcategories in each. Okay, so 21 categories, I suppose, which themselves contain up to a half a dozen specific law options. As always, everything there is being heavily iterated upon. Okay, so these laws determine the power structure. Laws determine who is in control of different aspects of your country. All right, so that's just what you expect. Basically, the political type of shit. So this is power structure, parliamentary republic, governance principles. So I guess monarchy, presidential republic, parliamentary republic, Soviet republic, or whatever. Distribution of power, census suffrage. So census suffrage versus full universal suffrage versus no suffrage. Citizenship, cultural exclusion. Okay, so that's, I suppose, the citizenship rights of minorities. Church and state, bureaucracy, conscription, and internal security. Really now, 1984. So that's that. Economy. Where your treasury's money comes from and how it can be spent. Your economic system is crucial. This governs whether your country will operate on the principles of mercantilism, isolationism, or free trade, among others. Income tax determines which pops should be taxed. Oh wow, you can do like progressive taxation and all that. Poll taxation, that's going to piss off the poor. Finally, you can choose which types or what forms the institutions of colonization, policing, education system, and health system will take in your country. For example, you can keep government spending under control by instituting charity hospitals, which have a limited effect and boost the power of the clergy, or you can pass a public health insurance law, which is costlier but can have a greater impact on the health of the masses. So, yeah, mercantilism for the economic system looks more like it's something that looks more like it has to deal with trade actually instead of just the economic system. Income tax, poll tax, colonization, policing, education, and health. This is pretty much what you'd expect so far. So yeah, basically this is the economy stuff, just literally what you'd expect. Also, human rights, not real. Anyway, enshrining the rights of the individual was a hallmark of the era. These sort of, yeah. These laws define how your pops are treated and what manner of control you enforce over their lives. 1984. Free speech determines the degree of your control over your interest groups. Okay, but the restrictive rights throttle the spread of innovation. Sort of, yeah. Labor rights laws include outlawing serfdom, but extends all the way to establishing workplace safety institutions to reduce the number of people literally crushed under. Is that really labor rights? No, it isn't, actually. It's like a completely different category of whatever. Children's rights and the rights of women have a number of effects, such as shifting the workforce dependent demographics, affecting dependent income, and extending the franchise. Welfare ensures the poor and disabled in your society are taken care of, and migration laws can be used to influence pop migration. Slavery determines the legal status of you owning people in your country. More about that in a future Dev Diary, yeah, of course. So, rights of speech, rights of. Looks like they merged together meetings and speech thing. Wait, no, it was the same thing. Yeah, it was already the same thing in Victoria too. Labor rights, serfdom abolished. Why is it 0? I mean, there's clearly countries in the start of the game. Maybe there's like a -1 for serfdom. I don't know. Child labor allowed. Yeah, the first level should be serfdom allowed because, serfdom. Anyway, legal guardianship rights of so children's rights and women's rights are two different things, which makes sense. I'm not really sure I would call it children's rights though. Children don't have rights even today, and that's good. Fuck those guys. Like, if they weren't necessary for like adults, children should be genocided. But in Roblox. But yeah, it's not really children's rights, is it? It's more like children's social role where, they either work or learn, right? It's not rights. Like, having to go to compulsory school isn't rights, it's a duty. Which, yeah, fuck children. They shouldn't have freedom. They're fucking dumb. Like, they're developing. Anyway. Welfare, migration, no migration controls. Ooh. Please go in. Slavery banned. I wonder if you can have like affirmative action migration where you're trying to like attract migration. This would make sense for some countries. So laws are almost completely independent from one another, which makes sense because like, yeah, you can have like you can have mixes and matches of extremely progressive in one area and extremely conservative in another one. So our aim is to set up countries with the best fitting laws compared to what they actually had in 1836. Yeah, of course. We'll see exactly whether or not they're actually able to like get it, you know, accurate. I'm sure I'll actually be able to milk content on this at some point. Is Victoria 2 historically accurate in 1836? This will affect pops in the country currently, but also limit which pops might migrate there. Few pops would make it their preference to move to a country where they're mistreated by laws. Saudi Arabia would, like, and the UAE would like be examples to the opposite, though. Like, migration is mostly dictated by economic measures, which is why, for example, in mainland China, where the citizenship system actually kind of fragments the country into different, basically, townships and zones and municipalities, where you're only citizen of the place where you're from. You're only like a full citizen of the place where you're from. And if you do internal migration, then especially if you're migrating from the countryside to a city, it is not really easy to get the residency permit, the hukou is what it's called, of the place where you're going, right? So in that case, you're migrating from a place where you're fully a citizen, you're not discriminated against. You're migrating to a place where you're getting discriminated. So you're technically, quote unquote, worsening your condition, except, of course, you have jobs there. So people don't migrate because, well, not always at least. There's, of course, refugees as well, but they generally don't migrate because of political or rights reasons, or because of discrimination or oppression or whatever. They generally migrate towards, at least when it comes to like serious mass migration, constant migration flows, they generally move towards areas where they're better able to earn a living than the current area they're living in. And of course, this is not like very automatic. Again, there's political migrations, there's various kinds of pushes and pulls that basically form migratory streams or whatever. But the main thing is the economy, right? So I don't know, this, I'm not buying this too much. Of course, if you're accepting of a certain type of people, it would make more sense for you to migrate there. But hey, whatever. So, as a result of these starring laws, Sardinia, Piedmont might have to look towards colonization or conquest if they run out of their native workforce. Now, this is something that's going to be interesting. They're trying to make migration more dynamic and not just like everyone goes to America or Australia. I'm not sure that it would make sense at all in the time frame of Victoria 2 for a country like Italy to become a net importer of labor. In other words, to be a net destination country for migration instead of a net starting country for migration or a net exporter of labor, because the sort of development level was just too low, right? Especially the relative development level was too low. So you have Italians going to, of course, America and United States, but you also have a smaller number, but still substantial number going to France and Germany during this period, even Belgium. At the same time, it could make sense for like Croatians to migrate to Italy. So you're gonna really, really need to balance out how migration modifiers work for pop migration to make realistic sense, because it really would not make any sense unless you're like somehow really breaking you're like really, really breaking the game by how good you're developing your country. It would make very little sense for most European countries to have in any way like substantial levels of inflow of migration in the time frame that we're looking at. Maybe again, except Britain and France to a small degree. Anyway, well, North America is likely to get regular migration waves to help expand the frontier. So this is what's sort of going to be like the big numbers, I suppose, these migration waves, which are probably going to be like, coded in modifiers or events. By connecting these effects to starting laws, many historically appropriate and recognizable aspects and behaviors of the Victorian era nations, such as their attractiveness to immigrants, are connected to a tangible property, e.g., poor or oppressed pops emigrating to the USA, both because of its demand for workforce and its liberal laws, rather than being arbitrarily encoded in the very fabric of the nation itself, the approach previous Victorian games took to encourage history in a familiar direction. However, these starting laws are far from set in stone. You might want to reform your laws, of course. So you're going to want to reform them at some point. Maybe they're getting demanded by some interest groups. Maybe they're getting pushed by them. So, for example, the industrialists can have the individualist ideology that can cause them to favor privately operated education and healthcare systems over public funded ones. Should this really even be a major question in terms of the Victoria 2 time frame? Whatever, shoots himself. To ensure the best that again, at this period, except for a few countries, really public education becomes a thing, but public healthcare wasn't. So I don't know. Healthcare institutions were mostly clergy set up, or charity organizations. Reforming your current laws to work more in accordance with your powerful interest groups' ideologies is a quick way to gain their approval, of course. So the inverse is also true. You can, if you to abolish the monarchy in Great Britain, the landed gentry is going to be angry. Okay, understandable. Now here comes the part where things can get really dumb, is how they balance out things. Trade unions disapprove landed voting by -5. I don't know. They're gonna need to balance out this shit. So of course, each individual interest group is going to have a balancing of the various laws that they like or dislike. Enacting a law is far from an instantaneous one-click affair. It's more like a focus, I suppose. First off, any reform must be supported by at least one interest group in your government who can champion that change. Once a reform has begun, it can be a smooth process that's over in a matter of months, or it can take years of grueling debate in parliament or horse trading between interest groups in order to pass. I suppose this is dependent on whether or not the other interest groups are in favor of it or not, and it depends on the government's legitimacy and on the clout of the interest group that's supporting and opposing the law, obviously. So while broader coalitions of interest groups in government give you more option of laws to enact, it also complicates getting them passed. Okay. And I wonder if you can only pass a single law at a time or not. I don't know. Let me close out here by tying this all back to the pops. How? Yeah, of course, laws have an effect on, the pops, on how much political strength they have, and such and so on and so forth. And, in doing one thing, one group will be pleased and another will be displeased. Pretty much as you'd expect. 30 minutes in. We still have time for institutions at the very least, and probably for the next couple of Dev Diaries. Now, institutions. These are the quote-unquote services your government provides to its pops. So this is schools and workplace safety controls, but it also means conscription offices, militarized police, and poorhouses. So this is basically your government. While laws are political hot buttons with your interest groups, institutions are a side effect of those laws. It's not as political fraught to expand your pre-existing healthcare system as it is to establish or dismantle it. But the laws that bring an institution into existence also govern what side effects they have, and interest groups will care a lot about those. So basically, institutions are which institutions you can develop are going to be dependent on many factors, but preeminent among them are going to be the laws, of course. So bureaucracy is needed to run an institution, and bureaucracy comes from government administration. It's one of the capacities that we saw earlier, which employ clerks and bureaucrats to consume paper. So this is, of course, tying it into the pop system and into the economy system. The more government administration buildings you have, the more and larger institutions you can operate at once. So if you can just like spam out these buildings because you have access to a lot of clerks, because you have a lot of literacy, then you're going to be able to build a big government. Ronald Reagan dies of cringe. Excellent. And that's, I suppose, the other big use of bureaucracy along with just governing your states. So you can see down there in this stupid country, we have plus 247 bureaucracy. It's Switzerland. We have some government administration and we have some base values. And it's using bureaucracy in incorporated states and in the pops of those incorporated states, in its level of education, its level of law enforcement, and its level of health system. All right. The cost of institutions, or cost of one level of an institution, is dependent on the size of the population across your incorporated states. I'm guessing in terms of bureaucracy. An important aspect of an institution is that the effects and benefits they apply only affect incorporated parts of your country, which is interesting because it means that, like, you can probably gobble up a bunch of territory and not make it incorporated, and it's not really going to weigh that much on your bureaucracy. So they really, really do need to balance out incorporated and unincorporated territories if they don't want unincorporated territories to be really overpowered. Anyway, these do not need to pay taxes to you, nor do they cost you bureaucracy, but they also can't access your hospitals. Okay. So ways of decreasing the cost of... So this is also supposed to be, again, how they're balancing out sort of tall and wide gameplay. So, of course, wide gameplay, you have a bunch of states or whatever, while tall gameplay, of course, because those states have less people in them, perhaps, you're better able to upgrade the institutions, and so you're better able to get more out of those pops, at least in theory, which is how I think they're planning to make, like, a Netherlands or whatever be somewhat viable in the mid to late game. So, ways of decreasing the cost of providing institutions is passing laws to decentralize your bureaucracy, society inventions like behaviorism that provide insight into people management, so tech tree, not incorporating stuff, sending a whole bunch of people to their deaths in terrible wars. Oh, right, of course, because you're losing population. So bureaucracy cost per investment level. Okay, that's just a panel that tells you what's going on. So the currently planned institutions are the school system, the health, the police, the workplace safety, the social security, the home affairs, the conscription, and the colonial affairs. See, like, all of this kind of makes it seem like it's going to be really, really easy to, like, avoid. I don't know, man. Maybe it's going to be better than reforms. Maybe. Because probably there are going to be ways in which you're going to make a really, really, like, strong and easily stabilized country. They're going to need to, like, really make you work for these institutions. Otherwise, if you can just, like, pass a bunch of social security and a bunch of home affairs, you're never going to have revolts, right? To a degree, you could do that in Victoria too as well by passing reforms. And passing reforms was relatively easy if you got pops angry. So I don't know. To establish these institutions, you have to have sufficient bureaucracy for their operation and then enact an enabling law. Enabling law. There are always several different laws that enable a certain institution. Yeah, of course, as we saw earlier. While the colonial exploitation law will increase throughout the throughput of colonial industries, okay. Switzerland has 3 levels of religious schools, 1 level of local law enforcement, and 1 level of a private health system, with a currently 2nd level in progress. So again, there's that, like, gradual upgrade system kind of bullshit going on. If your population grows such that at each level costs 173 instead, maintaining its cost to okay. Right, so again, you're gonna need to be balancing out your bureaucracy and institutions to prevent sort of going over governing capacity when your population grows. Okay. National markets, number 9. This is going to be pretty interesting because the markets is, in fact, one of the things that can make or break this fucking game. Because, again, it's replacing spheres of influence, which kills himself because I would have liked spheres of influence to be around. But, yeah. I also really, really love the idea of the national markets being around. So, markets are what drives the game's dynamic economy by determining a rational price based on supply and demand for all the trade goods in every state throughout the world, which is really cool. Expanding your national markets to encompass more territory means more raw resources for your industry and more customers for your manufacturing industries. So it's a feedback loop, of course. You're getting the resources and then you send your finished goods back. As your industrial base grows, so does your demand for infrastructure to bring goods to the market. So, we've got a French market. You can see the nations that are in the market. You've got your Sardinia, Piedmont. What? Oh, they're in the that are like trading in there. Okay. Britain. Okay. Sardinia, Piedmont. What the fuck? What is that flag? Some Southeast Asian country and some African one, Futajalon, perhaps. I don't know. I don't fucking know. And then you see your goods, your sell orders, your buy orders, and the sort of supply that is resulting of that, and the market price that is resulting of that as well. Then you can filter out by military goods, by luxury goods, by industrial goods, and by consumer goods, which so much better than the trade screen in Victoria 2. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Praise be to the Almighty Lord Allah for this change because fucking finally. Damn. Anyway, by default, every country is in control of its own market, which is typically but not always centered on their capital state. Every state is connected to this capital market over land or by sea through ports. It is also part of the market. Is also part of the market. These states all have a variable degree of market access, representing how well connected they are to every other state in the market. So if a state is in the market that is not well connected to the other ones, then it's going to be suffering. Market access is based on infrastructure, which we'll talk more about okay, in the next week's development diary. Yo, Tony, I got you. You will see nothing, but I got the hiccups, so I had to stop talking. It's always sad when I have to stop talking. Anyway, all your local consumption and production states contribute to buy orders and sell orders. Yeah, buy orders and sell orders is basically just supply and demand. Now you can see a single good in a single commodity, sorry, in a single market. You can see it sorted by states. You can see the production and the consumption. And you can show it on the map, basically. The production is all coming from here. I'm guessing the consumption is going to be more all throughout the region. Now, as we discussed in the goods development diary, all goods have a base price. This is the price that would fetch given ideal market conditions. All demand is fulfilled perfectly with available supply, with zero goods produced in excess of demand. If buildings produce more than is being demanded, then it will be sort of a decreased price. Blah 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 blah. We know how this works. So when determining prices for goods across a market, many states we start by determining a market price. This is based on the balance between the market's buy and sell order. Okay, so this is basically what I was talking about in the previous Dev Diaries. States with full market access will use the market price for all of its goods, okay. Otherwise, only part of the market price can be used, while the remainder of the local price made up by the local consumption and production of the goods. Okay, so it looks like access is what gives you. Yeah, access is going to give it access to the whole wide market, while local only allows the local production. So I'm guessing this means within a single state. Interesting. All actual transactions are done in local prices. Okay, I like it. There's an example for a single thing in a single place. If an oversupply becomes large enough, the selling price would be so low, producers would be unable to keep wages and thereby production volume unless they're receiving government subsidies. But oversupply is not remotely as bad as when goods are grossly undersupplied, which causes a shortage. Goods being in a shortage leads to terrible effects for those in the market who rely on it. For example, drastically decreased production efficiency of buildings that rely on it as an input, of course, as you'd expect, pretty much. So you're going to need to switch around your production methods to make sure that your supply is doing a thing. So astute observers familiar with previous victorias will notice that there are no goods stockpiled involved in the system. Yes. In the predecessor game, a single unit of goods would be produced, sold, traded, perhaps refined, stored, and ultimately consumed, with global price development determined by how many units are inserted into or removed from the world's total supply. While in Victoria Free, a single unit of goods is produced and immediately sold at a price determined by how many consumers are willing to buy it at the moment of production. Okay, when this happens, prices shift right away along actual supply and demand is traded within markets is modeled by using buy or sell orders. Okay, so it's basically just more complex in general, and I like it. Any stockpiling in the system is represented as cash. Okay, for example, for buildings, cash reserves or a county treasury. Or as pop wealth, which forms the standard basis for standard of living. So basically, there's no stockpiling because they can't code it. It would be just too difficult. Okay. Now, this means that Victoria Free has moved away from the fixed global money supply introduced in Victoria 2. The main reason for this is simply due to how many limitations such a system places on what we can do in the economy in the game. Also, it's not like real, like it's not accurate at all. With Victoria 2's extremely restrictive and technically challenging closed market and world market buying order, it simply wouldn't have been possible to do things such as goods substitution, trade routes, and dynamic national markets. Yeah, of course. Transportation costs for goods and so on, and the ways we have. So there is transportation cost. That makes sense. Okay. It's possible for several countries to participate in a single market. Sometimes this is a result of a customs union pact led by the more powerful nations, but more often than not, it's because of a subject relationship with a puppet or semi-independent colonies. In certain cases, countries can even own a small plot of land inside someone else's market, such as a treaty port. The route to expand your country's economic power is not only for increasing domestic production and consumption, but also through diplomatic and or military means. Okay, that's actually kind of interesting. Treaty ports will allow you to be to insert yourself like a plague into a country. That's somewhat interesting in my opinion, but will need to be seen how it is actually implemented. Anyway, here is the final dev diary that we're going to look at today. That is the infrastructure, which probably isn't going to be too complex. I mean, it's infrastructure. It's pretty much what you'd expect. So it simulates the cost of moving goods over land and creating a necessary, infrastructure to support wide-scale industrialization. Now, infrastructure is determined by two distinct values that each state has: infrastructure and infrastructure usage, which together determine its market access. So long as the infrastructure in the state is greater than or equal to the infrastructure usage, everything is fine. So it's just a cap. It's just a basic cap. And the state maintains a market access of 100%. But if usage starts exceeding the available infrastructure, market access will be reduced and then it will be cut off, basically. Okay. For example, if a state has an infrastructure of 45 and usage of 90, its market access will be 50%. All right. So basically, it's going to mean that a state is unable to fully integrate into the local market into the national market, which can lead to adverse price conditions from under or oversupplying of goods. Okay, that's really nice because it's going to allow quite a bit of nice interplay, but that depends really on how hard it is going to be to actually get states the infrastructure that they need. Okay. If your consumption matches your local production, as is often the case in rural states, not being in market is not a big problem, of course, because, the demand is going to be met generally by the local supply. Okay, but if you're looking to manufacture more complex goods, you're going to need, of course, a very integrated market because you're going to have more complex supply chains where your buildings are going to need more types of goods, and so the supply is going to need to be constant, as evidenced by the last few months in the global economy. The infrastructure usage of a state is determined by which types of buildings exist in a state and which level they are. Okay, so generally the more urban and specialized the building, the more infrastructure it will use per level. Okay, so chemical industries use several times more infrastructure than a rye farms building at the same level. So infrastructure usage is dependent on the buildings. Okay, I see. Which, yeah, makes sense. And I'm guessing some of them are going to be government buildings and some of them are going to be productive buildings. So, okay, of course. Infrastructure is provided and modified by numerous sources. Just about all states in the game have at least a little bit of infrastructure based on the technology level of the country that owns it and its state of incorporation. Okay, so colonies have lower infrastructure than incorporated states. That sort of makes sense, I suppose. However, over the course of the game, the most crucial aspect of your infrastructure is going to be, of course, railways. As we previously mentioned, railways is a building that produces transportation, which is an intangible good sold to pops, but you're also your main source of infrastructure. So, okay, so they've got like a little bit of a service goods going on. Okay. This means that if you want to industrialize a state, it isn't enough to simply build those industries there and have the pops available to work in them. You also need to ensure that said industries have enough infrastructure to support them. Yeah, of course. This means you need to provide costs and also goods because, of course, the infrastructure is going to consume goods. Of course, railways also grow more efficient over the course of the game, requiring less levels of rail to support a certain number of buildings. Okay, so are levels actually just like the amount of railroads rather than the quality of the railroads? Because, of course, in Victoria 2, more railroad levels equals higher tech railroads, while in Victoria 3, it looks like tech is going to increase the efficiency of the railroads. So maybe the amount or the level of railroads in a state is basically representing the quantity rather than the quality. Looks like railroads also have production methods, so that makes sense because, yeah. So our intention for railways is that they must always be able to find their way back to the market capital or an exit port destined for the market capital in order for them to be useful. That doesn't really make a lot of sense because, okay, no, it does make sense with how the market works because the market access, like, you cannot connect to local markets. Yeah, because I'm guessing that local markets are just always going to be isolated. while the national market is going to always be a single national market. Okay, this actually makes sense then. If you want good access to the sulfur mines in Aginskaya for your munitions plant in St. Petersburg, you basically start on a Trans-Siberian Railway sooner rather than later because it will take a good long while to build. Okay. Geography also plays a significant role in other ways when it comes to infrastructure, and this is represented in Victoria through state traits. State traits are bonuses or maluses given to a particular state, representing particular geographical features, climate, and so on. I actually really like this as an idea. State traits have a variety of effects, but the most common ones are either affecting the production of a particular resource. For example, if a state contains high quality coal, this is going to be represented. Or more significantly, for topic on hand, to provide or modify infrastructure. This probably should also have like military effects, but whatever, shoots himself in the head, dies of cringe. The highly old Russian forests are of great benefit to the logging industry in Minsk as long as there's enough infrastructure available to ship wood off to all the Russian factories and construction sites that demand it. Okay, states with significant rivers get a large boost to infrastructure, making them excellent candidates for early industrialization. Perfect. Love it. Fantastic. Rivers in Victoria too did not play an economic role at all, and it was kind of dumb. Before we finish off for today, I just also want to mention that the infrastructure does tie into a number of mechanics besides market access, such as military logistics and migration. So I guess two connected areas are going to have more migration coming into each other. And that infrastructure is only meant to simulate the cost of transporting goods on land. Where the sea is concerned, there will be other systems at play. This is good. Yeah, I like it. Okay. But all those are topics for another day. Damn, I actually really enjoy this whole infrastructure stuff. But just one thing that's kind of pissing me off is the fact that it's state based rather than tile based. I'll explain what I mean. The newest Hearts of Ironfall DLC is having tile based railroads, which are cool. And I feel like it would have been really cool as well if Victoria Free had a similar feature to the one that's being, like, right now being developed by another Paradox game. You know what I fucking mean? I feel like it would make a lot of sense in Victoria for a railroad tycoon type of experience, right? Where you're building this sort of micromanaging. I know it's micromanaging, but where you're micromanaging where you're placing your railroads so that, and then later, and then that is what goes into the infrastructure. I don't know, shoots himself. I guess yeah. I like the infrastructure. Again, I kind of just wish it was tile based rather than state based, because then even you could have, maybe this would be too much work, but then you could have not just state modifiers but also tile modifiers. A problem that I saw in a Reddit post is that, for example, Lombardy, or not, it was actually Piedmont. I'm going to bring up a Google Maps. So Piedmont is interestingly shaped, right? Because you've got, to the outside, you've got mountains, and to the inside, you don't have mountains, right? Although you do have some pretty nasty river systems that sometimes are obstacles, but, also can be used for transportation. Now, the state of Piedmont is, has a, high mountains trait, which reduces the effectiveness of infrastructure, which doesn't make any sense if you're thinking about an Italian market, because you're connecting through plains, You're connecting through a massive fucking plain. If you had single tiles, you could avoid that problem pretty simply. Again, maybe it would be too much work. but whatever. Anyway, that's enough for the Dev Diaries 6 through 10. I like them. Definitely, I would say the one I'm most skeptic about is the interest groups. The one I'm most excited for are the market pricing mechanics and infrastructure, because it kind of looks like they can have some serious ramifications and serious dynamic sort of effects on the gameplay. And that's something that I really, really dig for the Victoria Free. So anyway, thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.